When people call me about wanting to buy a home, they typically fall into one of three categories. First, they do want HOAs. They want it all. They want the resort style amenities. They want everything. And then other people are like, well, a little bit's nice, or a little, modest HOA is good for me. Nothing too crazy. And then I get the people who don't want anything to do with it. An HOA, nope, I don't want any of it. I don't want to pay the extra dues. Now, sometimes there's a little bit of overlap from one category to another, for sure, but the people who fall in that last category typically can be pretty dogmatic sometimes. I don't want to pay the extra fees, I don't want the extra expense, and I certainly don't want anybody to tell me what I can do with my property. And I hear that a lot, which is totally fine, but that's why I'm making this video for you, because just because there's no HOA doesn't always mean that you can do whatever you want with your property. So in this video, I want to share with you a few things to keep in mind, some pros and cons and some pitfalls to consider as you're looking at homes that do not have an HOA. Hi, I'm Jill Thomas, and each week I bring new videos about the real estate here in the Sarasota area. So whether you want to come here or maybe leave here. And then I also have videos about what it's like to live in Florida as well, because it is so different than up north. So if any of these things pertain to you, this might be a good channel for you to subscribe to, and then hit the little notification bell and keep watching those videos so it can be a help to you. So here we are. I have people, they come to town, I start showing them homes based on the criteria that they give me. So we're out and about, and then in some of the neighborhoods, like I said, we do have great amenities in this area and a lot of communities, and some are super modest and the dues are really low, like where I live, under $100 a year, so not too bad. They're not really heavy-handed with rules and everything, so it's a good fit for me. So I'll show them homes, and then sometimes people will say, well, Jill, why don't you just show me like a home, like a house? And it's like, well, that's what we've been doing all day. No, I want a standalone home. No HOA dues, no rules. Just why aren't you just showing me homes in regular neighborhoods? And sometimes it's because the other criteria they give me doesn't match with everything else, where it doesn't make sense. But we'll talk about that more in detail depending on their criteria. And so that's why I want to do this video, to show you the good, the bad, the ugly, the everything about these communities where there are no HOAs, because in the end, I want you to be a happy camper after you close, and I don't want you to be upset or surprised or shocked, a month or two or a year after you've purchased your home. So the first thing you need to consider before you purchase a home is what the county rules are. And I'm not saying like, hey, the county rules. It's every county, city, township, depending on where this neighborhood, this home is located, they're going to have their own rules regardless of whether or not you're in an HOA. It doesn't make a difference. So some of these rules might pertain to whether or not you have to pull a permit to have certain work done, or if rental restrictions, or whether or not you're allowed to take out certain trees, have certain trees removed. All those things are really important for you to understand. So for example, let's talk about rentals. And I've mentioned this in a lot of my videos. Here in Sarasota, if you're in the Sarasota mailing address, you may or may not be within the city limits. So the cities can have different rules than if you're just in the county. So the one thing has to do with rentals. So if you're within the city limits, you can rent out your property for 1 week at a time. Again, assuming you're not in an HOA and they have different rules. If you're not in the city, it's 1 month minimum. So for those of you out there who would like to get a property, use it some, and then rent it out the rest of the time, as an Airbnb or VRBO or something like that, to do it legally, the county says 1 month minimum. You can't do it any less than that. So again, just because it's your property, no HOA, doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. I know that between the city and the county, and I don't know all these rules, guys, so that's why you're gonna have to do some research and talk to the pros in these other areas, whether or not you need a permit to put up a fence. Or sometimes they're strict about, I know in Northport they're kind of strict about sheds, like you can put in a shed, but they're sort of weird about some of that stuff, and a good local shed company will help you with some of those rules. So those are all really important things for you to understand. Something else that's really big that's going on right now, or I have people ask me about, is if they purchase a property and then they want to put an ADU in the back, and that stands for accessory dwelling unit. And honestly, the first few times buyers talked to me about this, I had no clue what they were talking about. And I think that they thought I was crazy or incompetent or something like that, because I didn't know. But you see, in our area, they're strict on that. You're technically not supposed to have those. Now, again, I would always say double check with the county or double check with the city if that would be permitted. But I know, or even adding onto your house, just doing an add-on or something else. They're really tight on that. And so in order for you to do it legally, it just might not even be possible. So keep those things in mind. Again, just because you own the home doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want with it. Number 2, deed restrictions. Now, it's not uncommon. I have people in the car, we're driving around, we go past neighborhoods, they see a sign out in front of a neighborhood and they'll say, "Hey Jill, under that sign it said deed restricted." What does that mean? Well, it means there's restrictions to the deed. So you have the warranty deed, you have your deed when you close, but attached to that deed, not necessarily the paper that you sign at closing, but somewhere recorded online with the county, there are going to be restrictions on what you can do with your property. Now, typically, if a community is deed restricted, that means that there is an HOA, there are fees. But just because there's 0 fees doesn't mean that there can't be deed restrictions. I had a listing once here in Sarasota, and there were deed restrictions for that neighborhood, and the neighborhood was just one street. It was one dead-end street. There were maybe, 15 homes there. They were all super cute, well-maintained. But the community, the people who lived there, they self-regulated, but they had rules that were recorded with the county. So there were deed restrictions. Now, their restrictions weren't super crazy or anything like that, but things that were included had to do with not being allowed to keep like a big camper or boat parked in the front of the house all the time. The lots were a little bit bigger, so maybe you could have a taller fence and be able to park it back on the side of the house, something like that. What else did they have? They had rules about the fences and where you could put a fence. There weren't any restrictions on what color you could paint the house or anything like that, but they did have a few rules. So if you're looking at a listing or you're looking at a property and you go, well, $0 for HOA, there's no management company, it doesn't mean that there couldn't be extra restrictions tied into the house. So I want you to be mindful of that so you don't make that mistake of purchasing a property and thinking you're good to go. Maybe you're not. Number 3, make it your own. Okay, so as I mentioned, you may or may not have to pull a permit to do certain things, to put up a fence or have a shed, but generally speaking, I have not encountered in our area where there are restrictions on what color you can paint your house or add trim. There's no, what do they call it, architectural review committee like they do with a lot of associations. Nothing like that. So you should be pretty okay. There probably aren't going to be any rules in regards to having how many cars you can keep in the driveway, things like that. And honestly, sometimes just driving around a neighborhood, you're going to get a feel of what's allowed and what's not. If you see 7 or 8 boats within a few streets or campers parked in the driveway or on the side of the house, then you can kind of assume you're going to be okay. It's always good to try to double check and, cross those T's and dot those I's, but overall you should be okay. So I will say that even though there could be some restrictions, there is still a lot of latitude that you're allowed to have. Number 4, the no HOA pitfall. Okay, so you want to be in a community where there's no HOAs because you want to be able to do whatever you want with your house. You don't want anybody knocking on your door telling you what to do. And so that for you could be a blessing, but at the same time, it could be a curse. And this is why this is a pitfall, is not everybody on your street, not everybody in that community will have the same level of pride and ownership as what you will have. So you like to keep everything nice and tidy, keep your lawn mowed, keep your house clean, you don't keep debris in the yard, you don't have a bunch of cars parked in your front yard, but your neighbors, they might be allowed to do that there. And so that could become an eyesore to you, and it could bring down your property values a little bit. It's not that everybody does this in a community where there's no HOA, so you want to be mindful of that. We see a lot of fences that maybe are in need of repair, things like that. Now, or sometimes people just don't keep their grass as mowed and tidy as what maybe you would like. Now, if things get out of control and it really is in desperate need of being mowed and it's been like that for a long time, you can't call the county on some of those things and they might send somebody out to deal with that. Or if something is a safety issue, like I once had a listing and the house next door had this horrible shed that was just falling apart. Like they weren't storing anything in there, but it was very dangerous and it was an eyesore. So they called the county a few times, and eventually those owners, the neighbors, did get the shed taken down. So there are some avenues, there's some things that you can do to help get that rectified, but not completely. All right. So there are definitely some cons to living in a neighborhood like this. Again, drive around, see what other people are doing. And just because a street today doesn't look so awesome, tomorrow it could be beautiful, or the other way around. A beautiful neighborhood could go down if a bunch of homes are sold and then the new owners aren't maintaining those homes very well. Now, we do have some neighborhoods that are maintained really, really well, even though there's no HOA, but the price point is such that, somebody's not going to spend $800,000 or $1 million on a little tiny 2-bedroom house and then not maintain it. So there's some areas that are a little bit nicer than others. So if you do see a house online and you go, oh, look, this house is so cute. It looks really new. It's well maintained. Man, what a great price. But it could be that the other homes in the neighborhood are bringing down that price and the value of the home. So keep that in mind with these communities where there's no HOA. They're not all a hot mess, not at all. But it's just something that you need to be mindful of. There definitely is an appeal to be in a community where there's no HOA dues, no extra carrying costs, and you do have a lot more latitude on what you can do with your property. So you just need to go into this process with your eyes wide open. Don't assume too much, because you could be really surprised after closing and you find yourself in a little bit of hot water or just some frustration on some areas that might be super important to you. Now, if you have more specific questions about HOAs or the lack of them, please give me a call. And if you're going to list a house, and you need to make sure that your listing agent truly understands what is permitted and what's not permitted in your neighborhood. Because if, let's say, I see agents, well, they'll market a property and go, no HOA, get your next Airbnb, get your next VRBO, and somebody purchases it and they use it for short-term rentals and they're not allowed to, and they get in trouble, boy, they could come back after, that new owner could come back after the agent and you as the seller. So be very cautious on how your property is listed when you go to, and you go to market it when you want to sell it. And of course, if you are thinking about selling a home here in the Sarasota area, Bradenton, Venice, all that, here Sarasota, Manatee County, give me a call. I would love to meet with you. Come take a look at your house, figure out the best way we can market that home, because there's going to be somebody who wants the exact rules or lack of them that your house has. So we got to find that perfect buyer, and then you can sleep well at night knowing that it was marketed properly. Okay, thanks so much for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Have a great day.